In this lesson, you will learn how to configure web filtering on FortiGate to control web traffic in your network. In this lesson, you will explore the following topics: inspection modes, web filtering basics, additional proxy-based web filtering features, DNS filtering, best practices, and troubleshooting. After completing this section, you should be able to describe FortiGate inspection modes, implement full SSL inspection. By demonstrating competence in inspection modes, you will be able to implement the appropriate inspection modes supporting the desired security profiles. Each inspection-based component plays a role in processing traffic on its way to its destination. Having control over flow-based and proxy-based mode is helpful if you want to be sure that only flow-based inspection mode is used and that proxy inspection mode is not used. In most cases, proxy mode is preferred because more security profile features and more configuration options are available. However, some implementations require all security profile scanning to use only flow-based inspection mode for highest possible throughput. In these cases, you can set your FortiGate to flow-based, knowing that proxy-based inspection will not be used. While both modes offer significant security, proxy-based mode is more thorough and flow-based mode is designed to optimize performance. The flow-based inspection mode examines the file as it passes through FortiGate without any buffering. As each packet arrives, it is processed and forwarded without waiting for the complete file or web page. If you are familiar with the TCP flow analysis of Wireshark, then that is essentially what the flow engine sees. Packets are analyzed and forwarded as they are received. Original traffic is not altered. Therefore, advanced features that modify content, such as safe search enforcement, are not supported. The advantages of flow-based mode are: the user sees a faster response time for HTTP requests compared to proxy-based. There is less chance of a timeout error due to the server at the other end responding slowly. The disadvantages of flow-based mode are: a number of security features that are available in proxy-based mode are not available in flow-based mode. Fewer actions are available based on the categorization of the website by FortiGuard services. Flow-based inspection mode with profile-based NGFW mode is the default in FortiOS 5.6. You can operate your FortiGate or individual VDOMs in next-generation firewall NGFW policy mode. You can enable NGFW policy mode by setting the inspection mode to flow-based and setting the NGFW mode to policy-based. When selecting NGFW policy-based mode, you also select the SSL SSH inspection mode that is applied to all policies. Proxy-based scanning refers to transparent proxy. It's called transparent because at the IP layer, FortiGate is not the destination address, but FortiGate does intercept the traffic. When proxy-based inspection is enabled, FortiGate buffers traffic and examines it as a whole before determining an action. Because FortiGate examines the data as a whole, it can examine more points of data than it does when using flow-based. In TCP connections, FortiGate's proxy generates the SYNAC to the client and completes the three-way handshake with the client before creating a second new connection to the server. If the payload is less than the oversize limit, the proxy buffers transmitted files or emails for inspection before continuing transmission. The proxy analyzes the headers and may change the headers, such as HTTP host and URL, for web filtering. If a security profile decides to block the connection, the proxy can send a replacement message to the client. This adds latency to the overall transmission speed. Proxy-based inspection is more thorough than the other methods, yielding fewer false positives and negative results. FortiGate web filters are also security profiles. The security profiles are customizable according to the selected inspection mode. So the first step before setting up a web filter is to configure the inspection mode. Inspection mode is a system setting, customizable at the VDOM level. When your FortiGate is set up for proxy inspection mode, you must also define a proxy options profile. This profile determines the protocols your security profiles use. For example, to inspect web or DNS traffic. Note that HTTPS inspection port numbers and other settings related to the handling of SSL are defined separately in the SSL/SSH inspection profile. Good job! You now understand inspection modes. Next, you'll learn about web filtering basics. After completing this section, you should be able to describe web filter profiles, work with web filter categories, configure web filter overrides, configure custom categories, submit a FortiGuard rating request. By demonstrating competence in web filtering basics, you will be able to describe web filter profiles, use FortiGuard web filter profiles, configure web filter overrides, define custom categories, and submit FortiGuard rating requests. Web filtering helps to control or track the websites that people visit. There are many reasons why network administrators apply web filtering, including to preserve employee productivity, prevent network congestion where valuable bandwidth is used for non-business purposes, prevent loss or exposure of confidential information, decrease exposure to web-based threats, limit legal liability when employees access or download inappropriate or offensive material, prevent copyright infringement caused by employees downloading or distributing copyrighted materials, prevent children from viewing inappropriate material. This example illustrates the flow of a HTTP filter process. Web filtering looks for the HTTP 200 response, returned when you successfully access the website. So, as shown, in HTTP, the domain name and URL are separate pieces. The domain name might look like this in the header, host:/www.acme.com, and the URL might look like this in the header, /index.php $login equals true. If we filter by domain, sometimes it blocks too much. For example, the blogs on tumblr.com are considered different content because of all the different authors. In that case, you can be more specific and block by the URL part, tumblr.com/hacking, for example. Now let's look at the web filter profile. This security profile is supported in both proxy-based and flow-based inspection modes. However, depending on the mode you select, the available settings are different. The flow-based inspection has fewer available options. In these examples, FortiGate is set to perform flow-based inspection. The FortiGuard category-based filter divides the websites based on categories and subcategories by FortiGuard. In flow-based inspection, FortiGate offers an additional 2 NGFW options. Profile-based, default. Web filters are defined as security profiles and applied to the firewall policy. Policy-based. URL categories are defined directly under the firewall policy. Other profile-based options, which we'll discuss over the next few slides, include search engines, static URL filter, rating options, proxy options. In this example, FortiGate is set to perform proxy-based inspection. The FortiGuard category-based filter divides the websites based on categories and subcategories by FortiGuard. Other local options, which we'll discuss over the next few slides, include search engines, static URL filter, rating options, proxy options. Once your web filter profile is configured, apply this profile to your firewall policy so the filtering is applied to your web traffic. Rather than block or allow websites individually, FortiGuard category filtering looks at the category that a website has been rated with. Then, FortiGate takes action based on that category, not based on the URL. FortiGuard category filtering is a live service that requires an active contract. The contract validates connections to the FortiGuard network. If the contract expires, there is a 7-day grace period during which you can renew the contract before the service cuts off. If you do not renew after the 7-day grace period, FortiGuard will return every rating request as a rating error. FortiManager can be configured to act as a local FortiGuard server. To do this, you must download the databases into FortiManager and configure your FortiGate to validate the categories against FortiManager instead of FortiGuard. Website categories are determined by both automatic and human methods. The FortiGuard team has automatic web crawlers that look at various aspects of the website in order to come up with a rating. There are also people who examine websites and look into rating requests to determine categories. To review the complete list of categories and subcategories, go to www.fortiguard.com. So, how does it work? FortiGate queries the FortiGuard Distribution Network, FDN, or FortiManager, if it has been configured to act as a local FortiGuard server, to determine the category of a requested web page. When users visit websites, FortiGate uses the FortiGuard Live service to determine the category that the URL belongs to and take a configured action for that category, such as allow or block access. Using this feature, you can perform bulk URL filtering without individually defining each website. You can enable the FortiGuard category filtering on the web filter or DNS filter profiles, which we will look at later. Categories and subcategories are listed, and the actions to perform can be individually customized. The actions available will depend on the mode of inspection. Proxy: allow, block, monitor, warning, and authenticate. Flow-based, profile-based: allow, block, and monitor. Flow-based, policy-based: action defined in a firewall policy. The warning action is only available for proxy-based inspection. This action informs users that the requested website is not allowed by the Internet policies. However, it gives the user the choice to go ahead to the requested website or return to the previous website. The warning interval can be customized, so you can present this warning page at specific times according to the configured period. The authenticate action is also a FortiGuard category-based action for proxy-based inspection. This action blocks the requested websites unless the user enters a successful username and password. The interval of time to allow access is customizable. Users are not permitted to authenticate again if they access other websites in the same category until the timer expires. Choosing this action will prompt you to define user groups that will be allowed to override the block. When using FortiGuard category filtering to allow or block access to a website, one option is to make a web rating override and define the website in a different category. Web ratings are only for host names. No URLs or wildcard characters are allowed. If the contract expires and the 7-day grace period passes, web rating overrides will not be effective. All website category rating requests will be returned with a rating error. If you want to make an exception, for example, rather than unblock access to a potentially unwanted category, just change the website to an allowed category. The reverse can also be performed. You can block a website that belongs to an allowed category. Remember that changing categories does not automatically result in a different action for the website. This will depend on the settings within the web filter profile. If the predefined categories in FortiGuard are not suitable for the situation, you can add additional custom categories. You can add and delete custom categories as needed, as long as they are not in use. Static URL filtering is another web filter feature. Configured URLs in the URL filter are checked against the visited websites. If a match is found, the configured action is taken. URL filtering has the same patterns as static domain filtering: simple, wildcard, and regular expressions. Let's look at how it works. When a user visits a website, FortiGate looks at the URL list for a matching entry. In this example, the website matches the third entry in the table, which is set as type simple. This type means that the match must be exact. There is no option for a partial match with this pattern. Also, the action is set to block. Thus, FortiGate will display a block page message. There is always the possibility for errors in ratings or a scenario where you simply do not agree with the rating given. In that case, you can use the web portal to contact the FortiGuard team to submit a website for a new rating, or get it rated if it is not already in the database. Good job! You now understand the basics of web filtering. Next, you'll learn about additional proxy-based web filtering features. After completing this section, you should be able to configure usage quotas, configure web profile overrides, configure web filter to support search engines, configure web content filtering. By demonstrating competence in additional proxy-based web filtering features, you will be able to configure usage quotas, web profile overrides, search engine filters, and web content filtering. FortiGate also includes a feature to customize the quotas of time to access the categories that are set to monitor, warning, or authenticate in the web filter profile. You can customize multiple quotas, timers. Each quota can be applied to either a single category or multiple categories. If the quota applies to multiple categories, the timer is shared among all the categories instead of having a single timer for each individual category. If the authentication is not enabled, FortiGate automatically assigns quotas for each source IP, as the monitor feature shows. Now, let's take a look at how quotas work. As shown in this slide, the FortiGuard quota limits the time users spend on websites based on category. A quota cannot redirect the user once the website is loaded in their browser. For example, if the user has 45 seconds left in their quota and they access a website from the specified category, the selected website will likely finish loading before the remaining 45 seconds are up. Then the user can stay on that website, and that website won't be blocked until the browser is refreshed. This scenario occurs because the connection to the website is not generally a live stream. Once you receive the information, the connection is closed. Some FortiGate features can't provide direct feedback to users. For example, FortiGuard quota doesn't provide any feedback until users exceed the quota and refresh the browser, unless the Fortinet bar is enabled. The Fortinet bar injects a Java applet that communicates with FortiGate and gets additional information from features that would otherwise provide no direct feedback. The Fortinet bar provides a countdown for FortiGuard quotas. Other features that can't block pages, for example, application control, will show block events in the top bar. It is important to note that the Fortinet bar is only supported for sites using HTTP, not HTTPS. You can also override the filter profile. Web profile overrides change the rules that are used to inspect traffic. Overrides authorize specified users, user groups, or predefined source IPs to use a different web filter profile to inspect their traffic. In the example shown on this slide, the new profile applied to the user student inspects all of that user's web traffic from the time that the new profile is applied until the timer expires. To use this override, you need to enable an override authentication. When you enable the web profile override, the FortiGuard block page shows a link that you can select to activate the override. This feature is available only if FortiGate is set to perform proxy-based inspection. Search engine filtering provides two important features: Safe Search and Restrict YouTube Access. Safe Search is an option that some browsers support. It applies internal filters to the search results. When you enable a safe search for the supported search sites, FortiGate appends code to the URL to enforce the use of Safe Search. For example, on a Google search, FortiGate adds the string and safe equals active to the URL in the search. So even if it is not locally enabled in the browser, FortiGate will apply Safe Search to the requests when they pass through. Safe Search is supported for Google, Yahoo, Bing, and Yandex. When inspection mode is set to proxy-based, you can set strict or moderate access to YouTube in a web filter profile. For more information about strict and moderate access control, go to support.google.com. Only supported when using full SSL inspection because FortiGate requires access to the full header. You can also control web content in the web filter profile by blocking access to websites containing specific words or patterns. This helps to prevent access to sites with questionable material. You can add words, phrases, patterns, wildcards, and Perl regular expressions to match content on websites. You configure this feature on a per web filter profile basis, not at the global level. So it is possible to add multiple web content filter lists and then select the best list for each web filter profile. The system administrator can specify banned words and phrases and attach a numerical value or score to the importance of those words and phrases. When a web content filter scan detects banned content, it adds the scores of banned words and phrases in the page. If the sum is higher than the threshold set in the web filter profile, FortiGate blocks the site. The maximum number of web content patterns in a list is 5,000. Like search engine filtering, web content filtering requires that FortiGate is using deep SSL inspection, because FortiGate will require full access to the packet headers. You can use advanced web filtering settings to improve the web filter. The rating options are as follows. 1. If a rating error occurs from the FortiGuard web filter service, users will have full unfiltered access to all websites. 2. Rate URLs by domain and IP address. This option sends both the URL and IP addresses of the requested site for checking, providing additional security against attempts to bypass the FortiGuard system. 3. Block HTTP redirect to avoid websites designed to circumvent web filtering. 4. Rate images by URL. This option replaces blocked images with blanks, even if they are a part of the website in an allowed category. The advanced proxy option settings for web filtering are as follows. 1. Block access to some Google accounts and services. You could include an exception list. 2. FortiGate displays its own replacement message for 400 series and 500 series HTTP errors. If the server error is allowed through, some sites can use these common error pages to circumvent web filtering. 3. HTTP post is the command used by your browser when you send information, so you can limit users from sending information and files to websites. The allow option prevents a server timeout when scanning or when other filtering processes are performed for outgoing traffic. 4. Filter cookies, Java applets, and ActiveX scripts from web traffic. Good job! You now understand additional web filtering features. Next, you'll learn about DNS filtering. After completing this section, you should be able to apply a DNS filter. By demonstrating competence in DNS filtering, you will be able to apply DNS filtering on FortiGate. You can also inspect DNS traffic, but this option is limited proxy-based mode and is presented as a new security profile feature. How does it work? Rather than looking at the HTTP protocol, this option filters the DNS request that occurs prior to an HTTP GET request. This has the advantage of being very lightweight, but at a cost, because it lacks the precision of HTTP filtering. Every protocol will generate DNS requests in order to resolve a hostname. Therefore, this kind of filtering will impact all of the higher-level protocols that depend on DNS, not just web traffic. For example, it could apply FortiGuard categories to DNS requests for FTP servers. Very few web filtering features are possible beyond hostname filtering due to the amount of data available at the point of inspection. This example illustrates filtering at the DNS lookup process. DNS filtering looks at the name server response, which typically occurs when you connect to a website. As discussed previously in HTTP, the domain name and URL are separate pieces. The domain name might look like this in the header: host:/www.acme.com. And the URL might look like this in the header: /index.php?login equals true. When a device initiates a DNS lookup, it sends the FQDN information in the initial request. The DNS lookup occurs before the HTTP request can be sent. When FortiGate receives the DNS request from the client, it sends a simultaneous request to the FortiGuard SDNS servers. With FortiGuard SDNS service, there are two possible results. 1. Category is allowed. The original DNS response is passed, and the remainder of the connection flow continues normally through to the HTTP 200 response. At this point, other web filters might be applied. 2. Category is blocked. FortiGate overrides the site's IP address with the FortiGuard override address and presents a DNS error to the client. As a result, if you are using DNS filter and the domain is being blocked, the connection will be blocked before the HTTP request is even sent. Here's a look at the DNS filter profile. The DNS filter includes various configuration settings. You can enable or disable the FortiGuard category-based filter and the static domain filter. You also have the option to block DNS requests to known botnet command and control, allow DNS requests when a rating error occurs from the FortiGuard web filter service, redirect blocked request to a specific portal. The Use FortiGuard default setting is recommended. Once you have enabled and saved the settings you require, remember to apply this profile to your firewall policy to activate the options. Any traffic being examined by the policy will have those operations applied to it. So, how does it work? FortiGate queries the FortiGuard SDNS servers, or FortiManager if it has been configured to act as a local FortiGuard server, to determine the category of a requested website. When users visit websites, FortiGate uses the FortiGuard SDNS service to determine the category that the URL belongs to and take a configured action for that category, such allow or block access. Using this feature, you can perform bulk URL filtering without individually defining each website. You can enable the FortiGuard category filtering on DNS filter profiles, just as we saw on web filter profiles. Categories and subcategories are listed, and the actions to perform can be individually customized. DNS filter supports the following actions: allow, block, monitor. You can configure DNS filtering to allow, block, monitor, or exempt access to websites through the static domain filter. Entries in the domain list are checked against the DNS requests. If a match is found, the configured action is taken. Patterns set to simple are exact text matches. Patterns set to wildcard allow for some flexibility in the text pattern by allowing wildcard characters and partial matching to occur. Patterns set to reg expression allow for the use of PCRE regular expressions. With this feature, you can prevent many HTTP requests from ever being made because the initial lookup fails. When you enable block DNS requests to known botnet CNC from your DNS filter profile, DNS lookups are checked against the botnet command and control database. This database is dynamically updated from FortiGuard and stored on FortiGate. All matching DNS lookups are blocked. Matching uses a reverse prefix match, so all subdomains are also blocked. This service requires an active antivirus and web filtering license. Good job! You now understand DNS filtering. Next, you'll learn about best practices and troubleshooting. After completing this section, you should be able to understand HTTP inspection order, troubleshoot filter issues, investigate FortiGuard connection issues, Apply Web Filter Cache best practices. Monitor logs for web filtering events. By demonstrating competence in best practices and troubleshooting, you will be able to apply various best practices and troubleshooting techniques to avoid and investigate common issues. Remember that the web filtering profile has several features, so if you have enabled many of them, the inspection order flows as follows. 1. The local static URL filter. 2. FortiGuard category filtering to determine a rating. 3. Advanced filters, such as Safe Search or removing ActiveX components. For each step, if there is no match, FortiGate will move on to the next check enabled. You have configured your security profiles, but they are not performing web or DNS inspection. Why? Check to see if you have applied the security profiles to your firewall policies. Also, make sure that the SSL inspection profile is applied as needed. Additionally, to use FortiGate's DNS filter, you must use the FortiGuard SDNS service for DNS lookups. DNS lookup requests sent to the FortiGuard SDNS service return with an IP address and a domain rating that includes the FortiGuard category of the website. As a result, for this mechanism to work, the FortiGuard SDNS service must be reachable by FortiGate. Category-based filtering requires a live connection to FortiGuard. You can verify the connection to FortiGuard servers by running the Diagnose Debug Ratings CLI command. This command displays a list of FortiGuard servers you can connect to, as well as the following information. Wait. Based on the difference in time zone between the FortiGate and this server, modified by traffic. RTT. Return trip time. Flags. D. IP returned from DNS. I. Contract server contacted. T. Being timed. F. Failed. TZ. Server time zone. Cur lost. Current number of consecutive lost packets. In a row, resets to 0 when one packet succeeds. Total lost. Total number of lost packets. The list is of variable length depending on the FortiGuard distribution network, but it displays approximately 10 IPs. FortiGate can maintain a list of recent website rating responses in memory. So if the URL is already known, FortiGate doesn't send back a rating request. 2 ports are available to query the servers, FortiGuard or FortiManager. Port 53 and port 8888. Port 53 is the default since it is also the port used for DNS and almost guaranteed to be open. However, any kind of inspection will reveal that this traffic is not DNS and prevent the service from working. In this case, you can switch to the alternate port, 8888, but this port is not guaranteed to be open in all networks, so you will need to check beforehand. Caching responses reduces the amount of time it takes to establish a rating for a website. Also, memory lookup is much quicker than packets traveling on the internet. The timeout defaults to 15 seconds, but can be set as high as 30 seconds if necessary. Now, let's take a look at the Web Filter Log and Report feature. This slide shows an example of a log message. Access details include information about the FortiGuard quota and category, if those are enabled, which web filter profile was used to inspect the traffic, the URL, and more details about the event. You can also view the raw log data by clicking the download icon at the top of the GUI. The file downloaded is a plain text file in a syslog format. Congratulations! You have completed this lesson. Now you will review the objectives that you covered in the lesson. This lesson covered the following objectives. Describe FortiOS inspection modes. Implement full SSL inspection. Describe web filter profiles. Work with web filter categories. Configure web filter overrides. Configure custom categories. Submit a FortiGuard rating request. Configure usage quotas. Configure web profile overrides. Configure web filter to support search engines. Configure web content filtering. Apply DNS filter. Configure SSL, SSH inspection profiles. Exempt traffic from SSL inspection. Apply SSL inspection profile to a firewall policy. Monitor logs for web filtering events.